Ex-NASA scientist claims consciousness is fundamental and our reality is a simulation. I have to remind myself to post a video concerning water and memory, that water retains memory, retains images. And I have to tie that into what happened with Jacob when an angel of the Lord came and told him to do something concerning the water trough and his sheep. Now, what is this about consciousness? This man who worked for NASA, has devised several experiments to prove that our reality is a simulation. He says consciousness is not a product of the simulation, it's fundamental to reality. Thomas Campbell is a physicist, author, and speaker. He's best known for writing a book series called My Big TOE, where TOE stands for Theory of Everything. In this series, he tries to explain how everything in the universe works, from physics to consciousness. His big idea is that reality might be like a computer simulation, like a super advanced video game. He believes the universe started with a digital Big Bang and that everything we experience is part of a virtual world. And this idea connects to something called digital physics, which suggests that the universe runs on information like a computer program. Campbell also worked with other scientists to design experiments that could test whether we are living in a simulation. In 2018, he even ran a successful Kickstarter campaign that raised over $236,000 to fund those experiments. Thomas Campbell worked for NASA as part of the Ares 1 program, which was a project aimed at developing a rocket to replace the space shuttle and send astronauts to space, including missions to the Moon and Mars. His role focused on risk assessment and solving technical problems to ensure mission and crew safety. Specifically, he worked on identifying and addressing vulnerabilities, basically figuring out what could go wrong and finding ways to prevent failures. His job was to improve the chances of success for both the rocket and the astronauts on board, and before that he had had a long career in defense technology. He'd been working as a systems analyst for U.S. Army Technical Intelligence for 10 years, and then spent 30 years working on missile defense systems as a contractor for the Department of Defense. So while he's now known for his work on consciousness and simulation theory, his background is rooted in physics and high-stakes engineering, particularly making sure complex systems like rockets don't fall under extreme conditions. Thomas Campbell's theory, My Big TOE, TOE standing for the theory of everything, is not just a scientific idea. He presents it as a paradigm shift, meaning it completely changes how we understand reality. And he argues that consciousness, not matter, is the true foundation of existence. In other words, the physical world we experience is not what's ultimately real. Instead, it's consciousness that creates reality, and everything else, matter, space, and time, is secondary. And according to Campbell, our universe works like a virtual reality designed to give each of us individual units of consciousness, a structured, rule-based environment to learn, grow, and evolve. Essentially, he suggests that life is less about physical survival and more about developing our consciousness, almost like players in a complex, immersive game where the goal is to become better and more evolved beings. Campbell is working to prove that we live in a computer simulation, like a highly advanced video game. He designed 5 experiments to test whether our reality is being rendered only when observed, similarly to how a video game loads graphic as you play. And his goal is to find scientific evidence that our universe is not physical in the way we assume, but instead a virtual reality created by some larger system. Let's remember the quantum theory and the electrons that know when they are being observed, and the observer can direct them as to what's going to happen. Now, Campbell and his colleagues have proposed several experiments to test the simulation hypothesis, and while the specific names of these experiments were not widely publicized, their designs are detailed in the 2017 paper on testing the simulation theory. And these experiments primarily involve variations of quantum mechanics experiments, such as a double slit experiment and delayed choice quantum eraser setups aimed to detect anomalies that could suggest that our reality operates as a simulation. His experiment aims to test ideas by studying strange behaviors in quantum physics, particularly the double slit experiment and quantum eraser setups. These experiments already show that particles behave differently when they're observed. Campbell wants to take this further and see whether reality only forms when a conscious observer is present. The goal of his experiments is to figure out if reality reacts to observation, which obviously it does, which would support the idea that we live in a simulation-like reality. Each experiment is meant to untangle the relationship between consciousness and the physical world, suggesting that our minds might play a much bigger role in shaping reality than science currently accepts. And Campbell also founded a nonprofit group, Center for the Unification of Science and Consciousness, CUSAC, to fund these experiments. He argues that consciousness is not part of the simulation, it's actually the foundation of reality. In his view, we are not bodies inside a universe, we're consciousness experiencing a digital-like reality. Even if his experiments succeed, though, Campbell acknowledges that they probably would not give absolute proof that we live in a simulation. Instead, they might shift how we understand reality, possibly showing that the universe behaves more like a particularly participatory experiment than a fixed independent world. Campbell says scientists won't believe we're in a simulation unless experiments give evidence to support the idea, and his goal is not to prove anything. Science rarely proves anything anymore, but to create strong evidence that reality behaves like a simulation. And the big question he tackles is, what counts as observation? Normally, physics experiments assume that if you measure a particle like a proton, the measurement itself collapses the wave function, meaning the particle stops behaving like a wave and picks up a definite position. And Campbell wonders, does the observer need to see the data for reality to collapse, or is it just depicting the particle enough? Does the data need to be recorded for it to count as an observation? Does the observer have to be human, or could any conscious being cause a collapse, like, I don't know, a cat or a bird or something? He suggests running an experiment where the particle is detected but no data is recorded, to see if reality waits for a conscious observer to check. If the wave function does not collapse without a conscious observer, it suggests reality might only render when someone's watching, like a video game, saving power by only loading what you see. Normally, this is a completely random. Physics says that you cannot predict, but Campbell believes that if reality works like a simulation, he can force the system into a corner where it has to, quote, show its code, end quote. And here's how. He uses a beam splitter, a silvered mirror that reflects light half the time and lets light through the other half the time. If the photon hits the silver spot, it reflects. If it hits clear glass, it goes through. His reasoning: if reality is a simulation, outcomes are pulled from a probability distribution, like a random number generates in a computer, and if it's true, the system might reveal this randomness in a predictable way. If he can predict the outcome, it would be strong evidence of the simulation hypothesis. Campbell talks about the larger consciousness system, his way of describing the overarching intelligence running the simulation. Campbell emphasized that the state feels like being asleep under a wide awake. Your body is totally relaxed. Your awareness is sharp, separate from your physical self. He said Monroe coined the term out of body to describe this state, though it was previously known as astral projection. Now we go into something else. This is a very long article, but basically it has to do with the observer and reality. So, consciousness shapes reality. And this is by House and Wise, Vicky Verma. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. My Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.